It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the official choreographer to the Backstreet Boys, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to another edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33, almost 34, amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Anchor, on Spotify, wherever podcasters stream. Hit follow, hit subscribe, whatever you gotta do. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. Alright, this episode is another 2-4 this week. Since again, I am behind, again, due to a lot of personal stuff happening with me these days. And you know what, it's been hectic, but I'm trying to provide as much content as I can. And yes, indeed, another 2-4 this week is the first episode of the 2-4 is WCW SuperBrawl II. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick plug to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Some exciting wrestling action coming every Saturday at 3 p.m. Episodes of Foundation. They're new, they're fresh, they're exciting. Catch them on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're, as a matter of fact, if you're listening to this on YouTube, after you listen to the podcast, scroll to the right side of the screen. There's a link to Pro Wrestling Ontario's video channel. It'll take you right there. Check out our content and hit subscribe. Hit that notifications bell and hit that like button and give us some feedback on those videos. All right, we're gonna get right down to it now. So sorry, no, we're not, because I need to plug our social media for Pro Wrestling Ontario: Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook. Give us a like there. Give us a follow on the other two. You won't regret it. All right, we are off and running with WCW SuperBrawl II. Now, to give a little context here to the backstory of WCW. Now, at this time, I am 8 going on 9 years old when the pay-per-view happened. Yes, that is key. Because I had never once, at this point, ordered a WCW pay-per-view. Hell, even at this point, I only had, it was a couple WWF pay-per-views. I mean, again, pay-per-view was fairly new to our region here in Southern Ontario, in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And we had Viewer's Choice. We finally got Viewer's Choice in the fall of that year. The first pay-per-view they presented was the Survivor Series, and this Tuesday in Texas, for those of you longtime fans remember that. The first WCW pay-per-view they held was Starrcade 91, Battle Bowl, the Lethal Lottery. I still remember the commercial. And you know what? I wanted to watch those too, but again, I had a habit of a kid. Not all the time, because I got in trouble still sometimes, but it's just little mischievous things that kids do. It was nothing overly serious, except for skipping school when I was... Yeah, okay, that's pretty serious. When you're doing it at 8 years old. It's different when you're doing it in high school. When you're doing it at 8, 9 years old and you're wandering the streets alone, you kind of deserve to get in trouble. That's a podcast for a different day and a different show. But yeah, so WCW SuperBrawl, I was being built up, of course, ever since Starrcade 91, Sting and Luger. Now, here's the thing. The relationship between Sting and Lex Luger had always been really intriguing, even going right up till the end of WCW. I mean, it got silly a little while with the whole thing with Sting trusting Liz, and then actually was smart enough not to trust her, because, well, we all knew Sting was a dumbass when it came to trusting people, and I love Sting. I still love Sting to this very day, and he's one of my all-time favorites, but let's face it, he was a dumbass. I know him and Lex, their complex friendship, or frenemy kind of relationship, always played out really well on TV, I thought. And the lead up to this match, it was the one that, again, WCW was losing their audience, but the audience they had was this was the match people want to see. And here's the thing. Now, when me and WCW, I started getting WCW... Again, when I was about 8 years old, they aired the Power Hour on TSN, I think, and they also aired WCW Worldwide on CTV at, honestly, I think it was like 12:30 a.m. on Friday nights. Now, here's the thing. I was an only child. So I got a TV at, I think it was at the age of 6. I got a TV in my room at 6 years old. It was, like I said, basic cable, you know what I mean? Nothing like, I didn't have any, like, the movie network, because God knows what I would have seen back then. But, no, like, I didn't have pay-per-view capabilities on my TV either. Because, again, God knows what I would have seen. But anyway, so, I'm all over the place here in the early going, I'm sorry. But either way, when I got my TV, on Friday nights, because my parents would actually, because we lived in a duplex, we had the lower level. My parents would sometimes sleep on the upper part of the house, because usually they like to stay up late, just doze off to whatever they're watching or whatever, right? And then just not end up going downstairs. So sometimes, because the thing is, my area of the basement was too small for the television to fit. Because I had just the way the basement was configured, my area was never equipped to have anything like that. So we had the TV in my parents' area of the basement. So what we did was, what we'd do is on weekends, because I like to watch my late, and they let me stay up a little late on Fridays, even back then. I would fall asleep to the TV on Friday nights, and that's when I truly got more into WCW. Especially as the year of 1991 went on. Now, of course, I remember mentioning in a previous podcast, one of the angles that made me obsessed with wrestling, for lack of a better term, was when Jake the Snake Roberts, of course, had his King Cobra bite the Macho Man. That one really got me into wrestling more than I'd been, and I'd already been watching a couple years at that point. So it was only logical that any other wrestling I've seen with exciting characters and somebody intriguing would also captivate me. And I always was gravitated towards a few certain characters in WCW, and those were that of Sting, the Steiner brothers, because I just thought these two were just legit tough guys. And I always said, because again, I got picked on a lot when I was younger, if I was the size of these two, I could beat up anybody I want. And just see the way they used to beat up people. They were the good guys. That was so cool about it. They were the good guys beating people up. Because they were just trying to win. And just trying to win a fight. And, of course, Sting. Sting, to me, in some ways, I guess it was mainly the face paint reminded me of the Ultimate Warrior. And sometimes Sting would be somewhat incoherent, rambling at, especially early in his career, if you see some of his earliest stuff. I mean, him and the Warrior, Warrior is still more incoherent than he ever was, even in his prime, but with Sting's early days, that I've only watched years later, he could tell he was having some, just trying to ramble on whatever he could and just sound intense, and people bought it, much like they did with Warrior. But now at this point, Sting was a little more coherent, made him a lot more sense, was good at selling his rivalries, and I remember the issues with Luger. I remember Luger had turned bad in the summer, because with WCW, I didn't watch as religiously as WWF, but yet I remember in the summer of that, 91, of course, when Ric Flair left, when he left, Luger and Windham fought for the vacated title at the Great American Bash 91. That's a whole other podcast for another day. I guarantee I'm going to be doing that one. And Luger turned heel. He later aligned himself with legendary NWA champion Harley Race. And, of course, him and Sting had been partners, again, on and off, for quite some time. Earlier that year, they faced the Steiner brothers. Actually, just a couple months before that, I believe. And Luger had pretty much turned his back on everyone that he'd ever known for the sake of being champion, which I thought was a good way to look, a good way to be a bad guy. It made me hate Luger so much. You backstabber, you betrayed your friends. And I got really into Luger as a bad guy, for the sense that I did hate him because of what he did. And this whole thing with him and Sting started escalating in the fall of 1991. Now, Sting had been receiving numerous gift boxes, which, to quote old James, "Get out of a box, you're over, motherfucker." But anyway, so the last box was at Clash of the Champions 17. Now, I didn't watch this. We didn't have TBS at the time. Like I said, we mainly got the syndicated programming. But this time in the box, they did show highlights of it. And I remember I was laying in bed one night watching Worldwide. And again, usually I very rarely made it to the very end of the episode. Sometimes I'd miss the main event even. I was falling asleep. And then they started showing this whole thing. At first, there's this very extravagant, gift box. It was like one of those ancient Egyptian like royalty kind of cards that came out. Of course, Medusa came out dressed as like say like I don't know, somebody cosplaying as like a gypsy or Cleopatra or whatever. So no, I'm not being stereotypical. Thank you. But anyway, so Medusa comes in now. Medusa Michelli, also known as Alundra Blaze, at this time was aligned with Paulie Dangerously and Ravishing Rickrood, of course, who Sting was supposed to face and defend his U.S. title against later that night. Well, also out of the box after Medusa's seductive, I guess, dance, if you want to call it that, luring Sting away, like to, at least to turn his back. Like Sting wasn't really falling for it, but I guess still he turned his back away from the box, which was, I guess, the whole story, right? Which they wanted to do. Lex Luger, again, who's the WCW champion, jumps out, clips Sting in the leg, and just rams it against the ramp. And this, of course, and they do a great job selling on commentary that Sting's knee, of course, that was from the injury in 1990, which actually delayed his match with Ric Flair and delayed him getting the title. So it was a good story. Luger and Sting's like, even though Luger had turned heel, him and Sting hadn't really interacted all that much. So I guess some people were wondering what gives. And this is interesting. I remember I woke almost right up. I'm like, oh my god. And then they, of course, they went back to the live shot and worldwide saying Sting, of course, eventually lost the U.S. Championship to Rickrood because he was softened up. So, yeah. There was that. So Sting and Luger's official feud was off and running. And Luger, I gotta say, even in hindsight, here's an unpopular take on Lex Luger that some may not agree with, but some are also coming around to seeing, realizing as well. Lex is not near as bad as people say he is, okay? And even Ric Flair addressed this on the Four Horsemen DVD. Some of the things, he's like a major portion of the things, I'm paraphrasing here, a major portion of the things that surrounded Lex Luger during his time in WCW were the company's fault, not his. In the period of 1988 to 1991, and again, this is me as a Sting fan saying this, Luger, in my opinion, in that 3-year span, I'd say from, when he faced Flair for the first time at the Great American Bash pay-per-view in summer of 88, all the way to when he fought Ron Simmons in a Halloween Havoc main event, which is surprisingly good, like really good. Luger was having some of the best matches on the main event level in WCW. He was having better matches all around than Sting was in that era. Now, so I say, Luger was carried. Well, maybe he was. But I don't know. I watched a lot of those matches in hindsight. It seems Luger's keeping up his end. And there was a time, unpopular opinion, there was a time Luger could go. Although, I didn't know this at the time, but again, a little hindsight here for you. Luger was having issues negotiating a deal with WCW, a newer deal, and apparently he was becoming a real pain in the ass, which is where, I guess, even though Bischoff really wasn't in power at this point, I guess really rubbed Bischoff the wrong way when Luger came back in 95. That's why Bischoff didn't really want to deal with him, as the story goes. And it would also explain why Lex didn't really have any matches leading up to SuperBrawl II. And as a matter of fact, I found out at Starrcade 1991. Now, again, this is I knew there was no title match here with Sting and Luger. I knew about the Battle Bowl concept, but we didn't order this pay-per-view. I actually remember being the upstairs duplex. Now, living upstairs from us at the time. Now, before that, for the longest time, for 5 years pretty much, it was my Aunt Carol, my Uncle Terry, my cousin Jeffrey. I've mentioned Jeffrey many times on this podcast. But he'd moved out at this point. They'd moved out to a new apartment towards the east end of Hamilton. And I remember I was upstairs though at the duplex where they used to live. My other uncle, my Uncle Guy, he moved in shortly after that, and I remember being upstairs and he was like flicking through channels, and I think he was hooking up a new TV, and he was going to I guess he went to the scramble channels, and I could hear them introduce Sting and the roar of the crowd, and of course upset that I'm not watching Starrcade, as he was announced as one of the Battle Bowl participants. So for those who don't know, I'm sure, again, I know most people who listen to this podcast know, but still, this one seems to escape some people. The Battle Bowl concept. Okay, so what it would be is that they would actually put all the names of the WCW roster into like those. I don't even know what they're called, to be honest. You roll them. It's like people use them to draw lotteries, and you see them in the Royal Rumble drawings too that they show on TV. But yeah, it's the same thing pretty much. It's like they roll it, whatever, of quote unquote all the names of the WCW roster. Usually they had a camera in the babyface locker room and the heel locker room, and they would draw these random teams, which would usually 99% of the time be a heel and a face teaming up, and usually it'd be rivals teaming up against rivals teaming up to face two other people who are feuding. It was a good concept in theory. I think it's worked on a smaller level. I think it could have worked on a smaller level at times, but I didn't totally hate the Battle Bowl concept. I mean, I can understand why it bombed at the same time, though. But for your biggest pay-per-view of the year, I don't know. But anyway, so I remember wondering who won Battle Bowl. So I made sure to watch Worldwide, because I guess I missed the airings Power Hour on TSN, because their time they always flip-flop. They always change days. And I can never find it sometimes. Even though we did have a TV guide, I guess just didn't bother to look. But anyway, so I waited for Worldwide that week, and I remember I was really tired that day. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And then, so all I wanted to see was who won Battle Bowl. Well, thankfully, not too long into Worldwide, they told us Sting won, which I was happy. He got the Lord of the Ring, like the actual ring on your finger, yes, like a championship ring. And I thought that was actually a pretty good concept, too, because at least they're fighting for something. And he was calling out Luger for the title. Now, when I said Luger was having issues at WCW at this point, Luger didn't wrestle a single match. Well, okay, no, that's not true. Luger wrestled the Japan show. It was the cohesive effort between WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. It was actually the second annual super show that they had put together. And yeah, Luger, he worked a match with Masahiro Chono and won that match. Luger won, I mean. And yeah, and other than that, he didn't work a single match from Starrcade to all the way to SuperBrawl. No house shows, no television, nothing. Luger did some pre-tapes. Luger wasn't really on TV all that much, and it makes you think it's a foregone conclusion, obviously, as an adult. In hindsight, even someone who doesn't watch wrestling, who's a grown person, knows Sting's getting the title here. That being said, however, but for a kid who's 8 going on 9, he still wants to see this happen. And even though it was a match I mentioned earlier that people wanted to see, the way it was built up, due to Luger's current situation with the company, I think I'm just guessing. I don't know for a fact, but I'm willing to bet it turned people off. So, at least the more grown fans. And I have to say too that WCW in 1992, and again I mentioned this before. I mentioned it on many podcasts. I mentioned it especially on my Jake the Snake Roberts and WCW podcast. Check it out in the archives. WCW in 1992. Okay, yes, there was a lot of bad shit. Okay, but to me, I don't know. I enjoyed a major portion of it. I still enjoy major portions of it. There was I watched old episodes of WCW Saturday Night on the network, and I gotta tell you, most of them were good. Some of them were not so good. I find maybe later into 1992 things got a little weak again, but to me, most of 1992, I think that when the Dangerous Alliance started showing some cracks, I think that's where really, and Heyman would be off TV by 93. Yeah, I think that's where really things just went off the rails. And I should reiterate, Paul Heyman was not Paul Heyman, it was Paul E. Dangerously. That was his gimmick at the time. But obviously, people have been referring to him to Heyman for so long, I sometimes forget to call him Paul E. Dangerously. So anyway, that was one of the hottest things going in WCW at that time too. The Paulie Dangerously character was fantastic. The Dangerous Alliance was a great concept. Pretty much Heyman's revenge on WCW, just to bring them down within and control everything. I thought it was superb storytelling right there. And again, he had an amazing group of wrestlers. Again, I mentioned Ravishing Rickrood. I mentioned Beautiful Bobby Eaton, Arn Anderson, Larry Zabisco, and a guy by the name of Steve Austin. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, Stunning Steve Austin was a part of the Dangerous Alliance as well. So, there was a lot of good stuff happening in WCW. Cactus Jack McFoley was really rising up the ranks there. He was getting over. He was this crazed madman that, as a kid, he scared me. He scared me. You know why, though? Because my dad pointed this out. It's insane because of what his name used to be. I remember my dad didn't really watch much WCW at the time, even though he liked some of the old NWA wrestlers and that. But I remember him walking by the TV when I'm watching an episode, I think it was Power Hour, because it would have been worldwide, because he would have been asleep at that point. I remember he's walking by, and he says to me, "Oh, kind of looks like Charles Manson." I don't think he was saying it to me. I think he was just saying that in passing. I knew who even at that age, I knew who Charles Manson was. My dad was a fan of the Helter Skelter book, which is about the Manson trial and the murders and that. And yeah, mainly about the trial. But yes, so that kind of scared me even more, because Charles Manson scared the crap out of me as a kid for sure. And Cactus Jack used to be called Cactus Jack Manson. Yeah. So yeah, he terrified me. And in a lot of ways. So I guess you could say he did terrify me, but to the point where I knew he was, obviously it's a wrestler. He's not going to kill me or anyone else. Almost came close to killing himself a few times, not intentionally, mind you, but still. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, there was some good stuff happening in WCW at this time. Don't care what anyone says. I mean, they're entitled to their opinion, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel that people are too hard on WCW. So, here we go. Now, I should reiterate. WCW SuperBrawl happened on Leap Year Day, February 29th, 1992. Okay. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I did not watch live on pay-per-view. Aha! Threw a little wrench there in your plans. I don't even know what the hell I just said there. Anyway, I threw a little wrench in things I meant to say. No, I didn't watch it live. As a matter of fact, I was willing to try to ask my parents on this one, but I knew WrestleMania was coming up. I knew they were already going to order that for me. I didn't want to push my luck. So the show came and went. And again, even more so than after Starrcade, I eagerly tuned in to Worldwide that weekend, the weekend after the show, about 6 days later, 5-6 days later, and lo and behold, I was excited when they showed, I think it was still photos of Sting becoming the champion, and I jumped out of bed, cheered not too loud, because I knew my parents were sleeping upstairs, and I was overjoyed. But that being said, I still felt I had to see this show. Now, usually wrestling releases on VHS are very quick, for WWF especially. WCW is actually no different, oddly enough, even though they didn't have a devoted audience in Canada near as much as WWF did. But Jumbo Video carried their tapes. I guess they must have had good distribution up here, I don't know. But anyway, so I remember being at Jumbo Video, and usually the rule was that my parents would let me rent two things, a movie and a wrestling movie. So I remember we went to Jumbo, and this was in April of 1992. WrestleMania 8 had just happened, so I'm 9 years old already at this point now. My birthday was literally 2 weeks after SuperBrawl. Now I'm actually gonna leap back a bit before I jump ahead here to when I rented the tape, because I'm actually skipping a few things. Now again, at this point I'm in grade 3, and I'm really into wrestling. I'm bringing the magazines to school. Me and my friends, some of them frenemies, are looking through them. I didn't have a lot of friends who liked WCW. I don't think I remember I mentioned my friend Sandra many times on this podcast, and she was more of a WWF girl. If she did watch WCW, I don't recall really talking to her about it. I had one friend of me, I should say, because he was something. A kid by the name of Ricky, and he liked WCW. So again, him and I would get along whenever we were talking wrestling and that, and we were talking about how Sting won the title and that. And then I remember on my 9th birthday that year, because I remember a lot of big things were happening for me as a kid in 1992, and I want to give a picture of that as well. I'm 9 years old. I have not a care in the world. I'm just enjoying life. For my birthday, I get a new bike. I'm rocking a Washington Redskins tracksuit. They had just won the Super Bowl. The last one they won. And I was big into two players. Darryl Green, one of the fastest men in NFL history. If he got an interception, you were screwed. And that's why he was able to keep up with the best receivers in the league, because he could sometimes outrun them. And Art Monk, great receiver. The Redskins, of course, but the toast of the town was Buffalo. And of course, that my dad pissed off a lot of people, and he'd do it intentionally sometimes because he was such a big Redskins fan. Of course, being raised in the Redskins, I became a fan myself. The Buffalo Bills, of course, being so close to Hamilton, Ontario, just over the border, an hour away or so. And we would, because my grandmother was a big Bills fan, my dad liked to chirp her a little bit, and she'd get a little, not oversensitive, just shut up. The usual thing, right? So no, we're happy the Redskins won the Super Bowl that year. And Wayne's World, my all-time favorite movie, had come out in theaters just before SuperBrawl. And the reason I love that movie so much, again, I'm diving off subject here a bit, but just bear with me here. My Uncle Tim and I were very close at that time, especially. And he was my rock star. You know what I mean? He was. Picture this, if you will. This was my Uncle Tim back in those days. He had really long, wavy type, almost curly type hair. Depends on how you look at it. Resembling very much a Sammy Hagar. It was light, but not quite as bright as Hagar's hair. Well, it was in the days of when he was in Van Halen. Little slightly darker, but still light. But my uncle had the Sammy Hagar style hair, and it was really long. Plaid shirt or a band shirt. Torn jeans. Converse, mismatched Converse. He'd buy 2 pairs of Converse and mismatch them, blue and red. And he wasn't trying to make a statement or wasn't trying to sort of trend. He just liked the way it looked. That was that. When anybody asked him, he's like, I just like the way it looks. That's all he would say. It's like I said, sometimes it was a band t-shirt. I remember sometimes he wore this hat. Like he would tie that really long hair back and wear a baseball cap. Usually it was a Molson Canadian Rocks hat. Molson Rocks. It's big promotion thing that they did for concerts. So that was my Uncle Tim in a nutshell. He was just very laid back, chill. He could be easily annoyed though. Easily annoyed, and I sometimes pushed his buttons, but he was never one to stay mad at me, even though if he would get mad. Him and I had a really good relationship. He took me to movies, stuff like that. Enjoyed a lot of we enjoyed both Married with Children and The Simpsons, a lot of similar TV shows especially. And he was got a great sense of humor, kind of dry sometimes, but also he could crack a good joke, say a good one-liner. He was really cool that way. And he was not a big wrestling fan, that's the thing. That's actually the one thing we didn't bond over. He also loved hockey, loved the Montreal Canadiens. Used to be a big Ticats fan back in the day, kind of didn't really pay attention to much to the Ticats as the 90s wore on. And seeing some of the teams they had back then, I can understand why. But I just think him and I were tight. So anyway, the point I was trying to get to was regarding Wayne's World when it came out. And he was big into the Saturday Night Live sketch because, I think that was a culture he could somewhat relate to, and he found the way they portrayed it satirically was funny. So I remember we saw Wayne's World in theaters. Again, this is just mere days, I think, before SuperBrawl. It was myself, my mom, my dad, my Uncle Tim, and his girlfriend at the time. And I have to say, too, that I should say as well, his girlfriend at the time, wonderful lady by the name of Lisa, she was a big wrestling fan as well. Like, not as big as she used to be when she was a little younger. Like, she's in her early 20s at this point. Like, not as big as a fan as she was in her teens, but she would watch some pay-per-views with me at times. I'm sure I'll talk about her more on other podcasts. But I remember just that experience, all of us going to see Wayne's World together and just laughing ridiculously at everything, even though I didn't get a lot of the jokes. But I just thought I just knew it was funny. And to me, that time, for a kid, experiencing what became one of my all-time favorite movies, enjoying wrestling for what it is, even though times at school weren't easy, but, I would say even still back then in grade 3, the good outweighed the bad. Life was good. And I just had my birthday, getting a new bike and rocking the new outfit. And getting CDs. CDs like Bon Jovi and whatnot. Bryan Adams. Bruce Springsteen, of course. Just fun to be. It was fun to be me. And I had great cousins. That were like my brothers. That's the only reason why, as an only child, I didn't become like some only children do. Because I had cousins, tons of them, that kept me grounded. Because I had that interaction. I had aunts and uncles that weren't afraid to give me what for if I did something wrong. But they were all great people. Life was good. Now I'm going to do a whole separate podcast on WrestleMania 8. Probably actually pretty soon. I'm probably going to do it in a couple weeks. This WrestleMania season is not upon us, it's here. And I'm going to probably do about 3 or 4 WrestleManias even. Who knows? But anyway, so we fast forward now to April. Again, I'm 9 years old. The weather's really nice. I remember we were at Jumbo Video. Again, my Uncle Tim and Lisa, they were there with us. And I remember I grabbed Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter is Dead with Christina Applegate. My uncle was a huge, again, love him when Married with Children. He had a poster of Christina Applegate, which I thought was amazing. He was kind of chirping me a bit, you know what I mean? Some of my movie choices, but, he was obviously fully agreed on this one. And then I go to look at the wrestling stuff, which is in the sports section, which they had at Jumbo Video, and there I see it right there, right on the top shelf. They must have just put it up, it seemed. SuperBrawl II. There's Sting and Luger right there on the cover. And I grabbed it and I said to my dad, I gotta get this, I gotta watch this. And of course, they gave me the choice, so they very rarely ever said no to anything I wanted to rent. So yeah, we watched. We watched Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Then they watched some of their, because again, there were certain movies of violence. It seemed my parents didn't seem to mind me watching. It was more movies with sexual content and whatnot, and a little suggestive. There were some R-rated movies they didn't mind me watching. There was mainly the ones with swearing they didn't care either. But they wouldn't watch, let's just say I wasn't allowed to watch Andrew Dice Clay. And my dad liked a lot of his material back then too. So they watched their movies. I went downstairs to watch SuperBrawl II. Now, and this is where, of course, now I get into the actual show itself. So at this point, I'd already known that Jesse Ventura had arrived at the company. Now, for some I didn't know it was SuperBrawl II he debuted. I must have missed the recap or whatever highlighting his debut. Obviously, I knew Jesse Ventura from WWF. So I remember seeing, he's their commentator now, or color commentator. Well, I didn't say that at the time because I didn't know what that meant. But, he's a new commentator. So I'm watching this, right? Now, of course, I didn't think much of it at the time. Obviously, why would I? I can't predict the future. But someone reminded me of this not that long ago. And Jesse Ventura, when he's first introduced as the new, the new member of the broadcast team, gets a good reaction from the crowd. Pretty damn good reaction from the crowd. He hadn't been seen since on wrestling TV, like anything resembling wrestling, since the summer of 1990. So it had been over a year and a half, a little more than that. And he comes out and he says to Jim Ross, it's JR commentating this, he wasn't known as JR, but just Jim Ross, and he says Jim Ross should wear a cowboy hat because he can resemble J.R. Ewing, of course, the famous antagonist from the hit TV series Dallas, which had actually just come to an end not long before this. Wow. Jesse, I don't know, it's far-fetched, but did Jesse maybe predict that's what Vince would do to Jim Ross if he ever went to the WWF? I mean, hey, Jesse Ventura knew Vince McMahon well and knew what he was like. I think that's why Jesse's one of the few people that can really get to Vince in some ways, you know. So the opening matchup here is considered to be one of the greatest opening matchups of all time. Jushin Thunder Liger versus Flying Brian. Used to love the introduction for Pillman. I thought that stuff was great. And I'll be honest with you, Pillman, for some reason, I just gravitated towards him. He was exciting. He was fun. Now, I'd seen Liger on television. I thought he was unique, thought he was different, and someone I definitely was interested in, but didn't really see him at his best. Not even close. Not even close. Until this very match. Now again, I know it's not very exciting to talk about the actual show because I knew the results pretty much for the most part, but I still want to see Sting and Luger. Mainly because, too, now I'll get to this actually, I'll get to that when I get to the main event. So Liger at this time was the WCW Light Heavyweight Champion. Pillman had become the first to win the title, and he had lost it to Liger at a Christmas house show in easy for me to say, Atlanta. So Pillman had won the vacant title, or not vacant, well, it was vacant, but okay, it was a new title at Halloween Havoc. Only held it for barely 2 months to lead up to this matchup. Liger at this point, of course, had also held it for 2 months. Now, the WCW Light Heavyweight title didn't even last a year. But a lot of people associate Pillman with that title. So this match, and I'm watching it, and at first I'm interested, but not like overly excited. You know what I mean? But I still was watching. And as the match escalated, I'm in my little chair. I had like a little soft chair that would be in front of the TV, in front of my parents' bed. So because we had a rug there, but that rug was just right on top of hard concrete. So I need something a little more comfortable. So anyway, so I'm watching the match, and I'm swaying back and forth with every move they're doing. And I remember, like, because I had a habit of doing this as a kid, about 10 minutes into the match, I am like trying to go to the top, like making like my parents' bed is the top rope. Their mattress is the top rope. And I remember my mom nearly caught me jumping off the bed onto my chair. She knew something was up, but she didn't catch me. Because she was coming downstairs, I think she gave me like a plate of snacks or something like that. And I just said, I'm just watching the show. Yeah, nope. But I was really into this. And I thought Liger was so cool, even though, Pillman was my guy, but at the same time, like, wow, like, this Thunder guy is awesome. That's what I remember saying that to myself. Thunder is awesome. And I remember, even though I knew the result of the match, I still jumped out of my chair when Pillman won. Because it was just in such spectacular fashion. This very match launched the fandom I have to this very day to Jushin Thunder Liger as well. And of course, I was disappointed because he wasn't around very much after this. He would, of course, make sporadic appearances in WCW many times over the years, but of course, mainly Japan was where his popularity and his reputation were revered. And you know what? At least I got to see all that great stuff he had done in Japan, which I'd read about in Pro Wrestling Illustrated not long after this. And you know what? My fandom for him, because I always wanted him to come back. That's the thing, after this match, I always wanted him to come back. Like, when's that Thunder guy coming back? That's all I could think. But yes, of course, Pillman regains his title. And what a match it was. Honestly, very exciting. Liger went for a headbutt and missed. Pillman got the cradle for the win. They did the handshake, and the crowd actually really was digging this. Pillman was shunted down the card after this thanks to miserable tyrant Bill Watts. And no, I'm not shitting on Bill Watts completely, but at this time in WCW, he kind of, again, when I say WCW got weak by late 1992, even though he was taking over around this time, the full effect of his quote-unquote reign of terror took shape later in the year. And going into 1993. But I love Bill Watts. Mid-South Wrestling. Check it out, folks. It is amazing. I love Mid-South Wrestling, and Bill Watts, I will flat out say this, is a genius. A genius. But as we've seen in the world of professional wrestling, even some of the best bookers aren't always the right choices. Especially in 1992 for a guy like Bill Watts, who had not watched wrestling. It's on record. He did not watch wrestling since he sold his territory back in 1987 to when he returned to work for WCW in 1992. So there you go. People say Vince McMahon was out of touch. At least Vince McMahon's always been there. Alright. So that was fantastic. I remember I was really psyched up. I remember for the next couple minutes afterwards, I'm jumping off the mattress still. Trying to replicate. Yeah, don't try this at home. They didn't have those warnings back then, to be fair. So next up, we had Marcus Alexander Bagwell versus the Tailor-Made Man. Basically, Terry Taylor, from his time in the York Foundation, trying to be Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. Even at 9 years old, I thought, this is stupid. And guess what else I said too? Even though I was watching wrestling more religiously now than I was in 1989, I said, that's the Red Rooster. And I may or may not have gone, Anyway, I did not care about this. I was actually tempted to hit the fast forward button. Nothing against Not Yet Buff and Not Yet the Stuff, but Bagwell is just a very droll, kind of perfect little white meat baby face, or at least they tried to portray him as that. And I just did not want to see this. And actually, funny fact, earlier in the day, an episode of Main Event, which is another one of their like B-level, C-level shows, Taylor and Greg Valentine had just won the U.S. Tag Team titles. And it was the weird thing about Main Event, is that it's on Turner time. It goes from 6:05 to 7:05. The pay-per-view starts at 7. So yeah, honestly, the last 5 minutes of Main Event overlapped into the pay-per-view. I don't know. That just seems kind of odd to me. I mean, I don't think that it would say, oh, well, it's 5 minutes of main event left, but we're not going to order this pay-per-view. I doubt that happened. Pretty much anyone who's going to order the pay-per-view and was watching main event will probably turn the channel. I don't doubt. But still, it just seems kind of weird. Something that nobody would really try and do. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreading it a bit, but still, it's just very odd. And maybe it shows, kind of the little things that are happening in WCW at that time. So anyway, back to this match here. Again, nothing to it. Bagwell wins with a fluke pin. Yeah, it is what it is. But it wasn't a fluke that was at least built up like in the opening match, just kind of out of nowhere. But anyway, next up was that maniac, Bang Bang, Cactus Jack, taking on Ron Simmons. I really liked Ron Simmons even as a kid. Again, something just he was like someone you could rally behind, someone you felt like rooting. You could easily root for, and I guess he just had that appeal. Jack was a maniac, and I remember being pretty into this match and seeing it several years later. It's a pretty solid match. These two just beating the piss out of one another, just between two powerhouses, and. Like I said, I enjoyed it. And great finish. Whereas Cactus comes off the second rope and Ron power slams him on the way down. And he gets the win. Then there's like a little schmoz with Abdullah the Butcher, who's aligned with Cactus, and Junkyard Dog, who did not. With all due respect to JYD, who is, in my opinion, one of the greats of his time. Especially in his day in Mid-South, in his early WWF days when he first came to the company. He did not look good here. At all. Let's just say this. He wasn't much smaller than Abdullah. Enough said. And I've been a fan of Abdullah, the character. And he's even had some pretty good matches, especially against Billy Robinson in Japan, but... yeah, I don't know. And at this point, it was mainly mostly character-driven stuff, but that's fine. Obviously, I don't think people paid to see Abdullah the Butcher have a 5-star match unless it was in Japan. But, you know what? Hey, that character worked for many years. So this was a fun little match. I really liked Ron Simmons a lot, so I was into this. So next up, we have Richard, not Ricky, Morton, and Big Daddy Vinny Vegas taking on Van Hammer and Tom Zink. Oh my god. Okay, so remember how I said WCW in 1992 was really good, but there was a lot of crap? Here's a lot of that crap. And I like a lot of these guys. And by a lot of these guys, I mean Ricky Morton, Kevin Nash, and to a lesser extent, Tom Zink. Van Hammer, couldn't stand him, even as a kid. He's one of the few good guys I just could not cheer for. I don't know. It's because I liked rock and roll music, and I described my uncle earlier. Just something about Van Hammer, I didn't get it. So, yeah, I think this match around this time, I think I remember what I was... oh, yeah. So, I had a habit of playing with the pop tab on a can of... like, my mom would give me a can of pop. And I would actually just play with the pop tab and flip it like a coin sometimes. And yeah, that was what I would do. Pretty much. I think I started playing with my ping pong gun, which is the little toy gun that shot out ping pong balls too. And I was just shooting down targets. I just did not care about this. Yeah. Anywho. Did not care about any four of these guys. Wouldn't learn to appreciate Ricky Morton until I didn't know much about the Rock and Roll Express at this time. Wouldn't learn to appreciate him until years later. But the funny thing is, even though I hated this match at the time, not hated it, but just didn't care about it, it wasn't a bad tag team match. Watching it years later, nothing, it's going to blow anybody away, but it was fine for what it was years later. And to be fair, the crowd is into it. Tom Zink was hit or miss with me. There's some stuff he'd do I'd enjoy, some stuff I wouldn't care. But yeah, this one I just didn't care about this. But then I was right back into the show again, because it was Larry Zabisco and Stunning Steve Austin versus Barry Windham and Dustin. He's the natural Dustin Rhodes. Again, who'd have thought that Dustin here would still be having a pretty good damn career today. Anyway, this was the result of Barry being jumped and injured at Halloween Havoc when they broke Barry's hand slamming it in the car door. So at least this is an angle that's, built up to a payoff match. And I gotta say, I was, again, really behind them here. I was really enjoying this match. I was cheering hard for the faces. And I gotta say this, people shit on Dustin's matches sometimes, some of the quote-unquote smart marks shit on his matches in his early in his career. But again, he had fire. People gotta remember, he hadn't been around that long, and I think he had a bad stigma on him because people thought, oh, he's he's only getting this spot because he's Dusty's kid. Maybe that's true, but Dustin was trying. He was trying. But he hadn't been around that long. People forget that. Even Austin here, but Austin's one of those rare guys, and even people have said about this that worked with him early in his career, they said he got it pretty quick. But keep in mind, even Steve Austin at this point is maybe a couple years into the business. Barry Windham had been around quite a spell, because again, he grew up in the business too. And Larry Zabisco had been around a very long time. Matter of fact, Zabisco was not far off from retirement at this point either. So again, I really enjoyed this. And Barry hits an awesome lariat to win this match. And it was, again, with eyes years later, it was just a good old school tag team match. I cheered, I jumped up and cheered when Barry and Dustin won. And this actually lead to a spoiler, this actually lead to a very good breakup between Barry and Dustin. Actually, they would win the tag titles later. It lead to a pretty good breakup, but sadly the payoff was very lack of a great payoff was disappointing, because that was a good breakup angle. Months later. And I remember I despised Barry for the longest time after that. So the tag team titles are on the line. It is Rick and Scott Steiner, the Steiner brothers, versus the tag team champions at the time, Arn Anderson and Beautiful Bobby Eaton, both representing the Dangerous Alliance. I should mention, too, that Austin and Zabisco are representing the Alliance as well. Now, I don't know, maybe, and I'm seeing how great some of these matches are and how well booked this show is, because even the Bagwell-Taylor-Made Man match, that tag team match I didn't care about, weren't bad. It's a well put together show. I think, I'm just speculating, but they may be trying to make SuperBrawl the big ace numero uno pay-per-view show, their WrestleMania, because Starrcade didn't seem like a WrestleMania, and I've seen 91, the Battle Bowl. It didn't seem like a huge event at all, really. I don't know, maybe was they trying something new with the SuperBrawl concept, trying to make it WCW's #1 pay-per-view? I mean, even look at the next year, which I'm sure I'll cover. Very much possible. So anyway, this match was actually pretty good as well. Again, I love the Steiners. I was excited to watch this, even though I knew the Steiners hadn't won. That's the thing. Being a kid, I get caught up in it. Again, like I said, I knew the results of most of these matches. To be honest, I didn't know the result of the previous one. And it was mainly the title matches I knew the results of, because again, they were on TV with the championships long after this aired. So, bear with me. All right, so coming up next, the tag team title match, and I'm really behind it. Maybe I'm thinking as a kid I could just make it like the Steiners would maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. Just being the dreams of a kid watching wrestling, it's hard to explain at times. But no, I'll still watch this right into this. And you know what? I will also say that Arn and Bobby were actually a pretty good tag team that didn't last too long, obviously. But you know what? They had something there. And this whole Dangerous Alliance thing, as they're dominating the company, Rickrood's the U.S. champion. These two are the tag champions. Even though Austin and Zabisco lost, I mean, it wasn't like it was going to kill the whole story. You know, and it just built it up even further. And I will say this too, that the Steiners, way ahead of their time. And like, these are the type of good guys that I want to be in life. You know, when you're a kid who does get picked on, you want to be like these guys. Because they were good guys, shit kickers. So anyway, I'm sorry, moving forward. And this actually ties into, again, some unfinished business with the Steiners, because Arn and Zabisco won them against the Steiners back in September at 91 at a Clash. Steamboat and Rhodes won them a couple months later. Then a couple months after that, Arn won them back with Bobby this time, though. Yeah, so the Steiners were disqualified in what some people call a fuck finish. Basically, Medusa, who of course is aligned with the Dangerous Alliance, gives Arn some powder, blinds Rick with, but then the ref bump happens. Scott hits the Frankensteiner, and on Eaton, ref 2 counts the pin, the place goes crazy. Then the referee... Oh, fuck, I don't... So yeah, the Steiners were DQ'd in a fuck double ref finish. And that was what it was. Oh boy. Anywho. So, Rickrood, ravishing Rickrood versus Ricky Steemo for the U.S. title. I actually enjoyed this feud. These guys, I thought, had built a nice personal tension with one another. Steamboat, of course, babyface of babyfaces, going for the title. Of course, people were going to be behind him, as was I. I loved Steamboat, even back then. Just thought he was so cool. And Paulie was banned from ringside during this match. That was the big stipulation. Because Heyman, of course, liked to use his phone as a weapon. I think Steamboat had gotten hit a couple times with it, so it makes sense, right? You think this is it. Rude's finally going to... Well, not finally going to lose. He hadn't had it that long, but he's going to lose this U.S. title. And, of course, during this match, which was great, just great back-and-forth story between these two, Steamboat's comebacks. Again, you can watch this through adult eyes. It's well-timed, but I'm right into it. As soon as Steamboat makes his comeback, and I'm clutching onto my chair, even though I know he didn't win. I'm still into this match, and I'm clutching onto the soft chair because I'm actually, again, even though I know Rude was the champion, I'm hoping Steamboat can win somehow. I don't like, maybe count out or DQ, because again, back then I still liked it if my guys won, even if they didn't win the title. It was pissed me off sometimes, yes, but at the very least, knowing Rude was still the champion, I wanted Steamboat to still win this match somehow. So, a ninja appears in this matchup. Yes, a ninja. I'm not kidding. And you know what? I do have to point this out too. Rude's heat here with this crowd, incredible. Like Rude in WCW, his run there is underrated because he was just so good. So anyway, Mysterious Ninja is at ringside here because he's at ringside, and guess what? Since this ninja was supposed to be on Steamboat's side, because I guess it was his personal trainer and bodyguard to keep the Dangerous Alliance at bay, the ninja suddenly pulls out a suspicious-looking cell phone and breaks it over Steamboat's head. The ninja earlier in the night had probably been abducted, and it was Paulie, of course. Great plan, great heat. Oh, the heat here was off the charts. And it continued the Great Dangerous Alliance versus WCW Babyfaces feud. And I remember just hating Paulie. And again, knowing Rude was still a champion, I still hated Paulie so much after this. Saying, I want somebody to kill that scum-sucking weasel. A term I heard my parents use a couple times. And I was repeating it, even though I would never repeat it in front of them, even back then. So, main event, WCW World Title match. Here it is, Sting and Luger. Now, here's why this is interesting. Again, I just watched WrestleMania 8 a couple weeks before this, live. We watched it live on pay-per-view. Lex Luger had debuted in a segment with Bobby the Brain Heenan via satellite for the World Bodybuilding Federation, Vince McMahon's pet project. Yes, Lex Luger, a fantastic wrestler. I don't care what anyone says. He's a great performer. A star. People know him as a bodybuilder. Anyway, so I want to see how Luger's final match went down. And yes, he hadn't wrestled. He only wrestled once in Starrcade before this match. Luger, he watched this match later. He did not give two shits at all. But I was enjoying watching Sting pretty much just kill him. Harley attempts a couple interferences. He interferes again, it backfires. Sting comes in with a flying body press to win the title. I still jumped, I still cheered, but to be honest, even watching this match at the age of 9, even though I was excited to watch it, honestly, I kind of lost interest halfway through it. Not because I knew Sting won, because I was expecting something awesome. I didn't get it. But be that as it may, as I rewound the tape, as my parents always instructed me to do, around the tape, put it back in the case, I enjoyed what I watched. It was a good night. And heading to bed, I was happy with what I saw. And years later, as an adult, it holds up as a very good show. So yeah, that does it, actually. So Sting would go on to hold the title for a few months and would lose it to Vader. And they would engage in one of the most intriguing feuds at this time. Not just in WCW, but in wrestling. I'd say Sting versus Vader was probably one of the best main event feuds of the year for any company. And there you have it, folks. My portrayal of a young 8 going on 9-year-old, 1992. Didn't watch the pay-per-view live, but it was still something to watch it on tape. Never made me lose my appreciation for Sting, though, even though the match was not great. Like I said, I still cheered when Sting won, even though I already knew he did, but the match itself just didn't captivate me like some of the others on this show did. Even the one before it, Steemo and Rude, I was more into that. And I was more angry at Paul, because I didn't know the finish. Like I said, I knew Rude won, but I didn't know the finish. I thought maybe Steamboat won by disqualification or count out. He didn't. But anyway, this one's ran a little longer than I thought it would, but so I'm going to wrap things up right now. Thank you all for joining me once again here. Again, I appreciate you guys who listen. So yes, if you're listening to this right now, I released another episode this week as well, which is 2 episodes almost in one. My first ever Alpha One wrestling show here in Hamilton, Ontario. It's a 10-year anniversary that just passed. And that very same day, the 2011 Elimination Chamber, again, also fitting because WWE just aired the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view this past weekend as I record this. So, yes, I'll be actually recording that shortly, and it'll also be airing when this podcast is released as well. Another 2 for. I'm going to go back to 1. Now things are starting to hopefully get better, so I can start returning to my normal schedule again. I know I keep saying that, but it's been a little rough, so bear with me, please. So, also social media. Want to follow me on social media? BillChase33 on Twitter and on Instagram. Also, follow me. You can add me on Facebook. I like to talk a lot about wrestling, especially old-style wrestling. So you can add me to Facebook if you so desire. So until next time, this is your friend and mine, Bill Chase, quoting a legendary Hamiltonian when I tell you all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just try and support Bill's new endeavor as a hand model with his website, onlyhands.com. May or may not exist.